Hi, this is Mashnu, and I received your second game, so we're going to have a look at it now. It's a victory, so first of all, congratulations with this win. You write that you think that you made well use of your tactics, and that's true. There were indeed some tactics in the game that you could use. You recognized some patterns and won the game with an attack against the Black King. Also, you write that you have the feeling that you were helped by the mistakes of your opponent. Of course, if our opponent doesn't make any mistake, then it's impossible to win. So it's always so that we are helped a bit by our opponent, and depending on the level of play, some of those mistakes may be very basic, very clear, and on higher levels of chess mistakes are also made, but they are more subtle. So that is the only difference. Now, before I start commenting the game itself, on the previous video there were some comments from other people that said something like, Mashnu, don't post this kind of videos because the level is too low, or there are too many mistakes in this kind of games. Don't bother about those comments, because I find that even on lower levels of play, everyone deserves the attention needed to improve. And if someone is rated 900, he can learn from someone who is rated 1100, and if someone who is rated 1100, he can learn from someone who is rated 1400, and so that goes on and on. We all started as beginners. Even the world champions were once beginners. So each of us, we are working on our own level, trying to improve and making the next step to become better chess players. So don't worry about those kind of comments. Just keep working on your own play. That's the thing to do. And let's go to the game now. e4, d5, the Scandinavian defense is the defense call that is played by your opponent. Here you choose to play knight to c3. A more common reply is to take the pawn. Then black retakes, and you can develop your knight winning a tempo. Knight c3 attacking the queen. Queen often goes to a5. Now d4, controlling the center, and knight f6, black starts developing, and this is the normal continuation in this position. Here c6 is a move that black often plays, not only to control the d5 square, but also to make space for the queen to retreat to c7 or d8. Bishop to c4 is here played often, the bishop on this diagonal attacking the f7 pawn, bishop to f5, and now bishop d2, with the idea of retreat, moving the knight away, attacking the queen. Sometimes here black plays e6, sometimes they play queen c7, for example, things like that. But well, this is, let's say, the way that the game can develop if you take the pawn on d5. But you played knight to c3. Your opponent continued with d4, and thus he accepts the invitation, in fact, of advancing this pawn. The knight goes to e2, e5, reinforcing the d4 pawn. You play d3, making the diagonal open for your bishop to advance, and defending the e4 pawn. Bishop to b4 check, c3. The bishop goes back to c5 now, and you play knight to f3, developing your knight and attacking the e5 pawn. He defends it with knight to c6. And here you play a move that is not the best move. You play bishop to d2. Well, it's not a very active way of developing the bishop, but besides that, there was a way that you could have won a pawn here. And The idea of this is hidden behind the fact that this pawn on e5 is only defended by the knight on c6. So that means that if we can chase away this knight from c6, after it moves we can take the pawn on e5. Now this can be achieved by advancing the b pawn to b4 and to b5. So let's see how it looks like. You play b4, the bishop is attacked, it must move away, and then b5 attacking the knight. When the knight moves away, the pawn on e5 falls. So with white we win a pawn this way. Let's return to the game now. You played bishop to d2, bishop to g4, queen to b3, attacking the b7 pawn and also the f7 pawn eventually. He takes now on f3, you take with the pawn. This means that the pawn on f3 can become a bit weak later. On the other hand, we open the g file for eventually a rook going to g1, and we open the diagonal here to eventually develop the bishop that way, because on the other side it's blocked by its own pawns. So this is a possible idea. Now he plays b6, saving his pawn on d7 that was attacked, and this pawn on f3 becomes the target for black. Black tries to attack it. You played here a move bishop to h3. Now, as I said before, this is of course possible now since the pawn on g is not longer on g2, but we must be careful with this kind of moves because the bishop on h3 is undefended, and that makes it possible for black to use the queen by moving it to h4, attacking the bishop, and also looking at f2. Now f2 is defended by the king, but we must keep in mind that this bishop can attack f2. If this pawn takes on c3, then this diagonal is opened. So then things can become dangerous. The concrete variation could look like this. If here black takes on c3 first and we take back, then he plays queen to h4, attacking the bishop and attacking f2. Of course we can try to block this diagonal here by advancing the d4 pawn, so playing d4, attacking his bishop. Here if he takes on h3, we take his bishop, and then he can take on f3, attacking the rook, and we can move the rook to g1. Another possibility that we must look at is that if he doesn't take the bishop right now, but first he takes here, what happens then? In this case we retake with the pawn, and he takes again on d4. And now we have to make a decision. We can take on d4 again, and he can either take on d4 or on h3. Queen takes h3 looks good because now the knight is attacked and it is a defender of f3. f2 may become a target, so it gets a bit tricky here. Black can get some active play, but well, in the game black didn't see this this possibility of attacking those 2 points of f2 and h3. He played another move that's also an attacking move. He plays queen to f6, attacking f3 directly. Now you took on d4, he took on d4 with the pawn, and you played the knight to f4, finding a good square to go where it attacks the queen and it attacks the pawn on c7, and the pawn on c7 is the fork, so this is a good threat. Your opponent played here knight to e5, and you saw this knight coming to f3, giving a check, so you castled queenside, and that's the correct thing to do. But this pawn on f3 now will fall doesn't really matter much, because what more important is now is that this king is still in the center and he doesn't have anymore his light square bishop. So these light squares can become useful for white, since there is no light square bishop of black that can control them. He took on f3 now, and you played the knight to d5, attacking the queen and attacking the pawn on c7. He tried to defend both things at the same time by playing queen to d6, not a very handy way of defending this c7 pawn, because now you had the chance of playing the bishop to f4, where it attacks the queen and the pawn on c7 behind it. So instead of playing this bishop to f4 right now, you decided to play the move e5. There is a logical thought behind this, of course, that is that you want to open this e-file, since the opponent's king is in the center. He took on e5, knight takes e5, and then you placed your rook on e1, pinning the knight, threatening, for example, f4, winning this knight. It was necessary now for your opponent to move the king away to f8. That would have been the only good move, actually. But instead of that, he played knight to f6, trying to develop here. And you continue with knight takes f6 check, queen takes f6, and now a nice tactic that you spotted, rook takes e5. This is very good. If he retakes with the queen, then rook to e1 wins the queen. So he cannot take back there, and that means that you have won a piece now. He moved his bishop to e7, and in fact the same tactical pattern repeats, because now you play rook takes e7 very well, because now he cannot take with the queen, so he must take with the king. This is a sacrifice of the exchange, and what you get as compensation is that the king of the opponent moves forward into dangerous space. So king takes e7 is played now, and here is the question: how to continue the attack. You chose to continue with rook to e1. I want to show you another variation, and that is to give a check on b4. The interesting thing about this is that c5 is not possible now. Well, it is possible, but then white can take on c5, sacrificing the bishop, and after he takes back, then queen b7 check brings black into serious trouble. If the black king goes to the back rank, then you can take on a8, and if he goes forward, for example here, then you can give a check on d7. If he goes to e5, then there is rook e1 check, and then the only place where black can go with the king is king to f4, and then queen to g4 is checkmate. So this would have been a very good way to continue the attack. It's not easy to decide, okay, how to attack now, with rook e1 check at first, or should I play a queen a3 check, or queen to d5 perhaps, or bishop to b4. There are so many possibilities to continue that at a certain point we must simply make a decision, calculate as good as possible, and then make the move. You chose for rook to e1 check. He played king to f8, and now you continued with queen to b4. I don't think this is the best idea, because after c5, what your opponent played, we are actually, the queen is a bit out of the attack now. You need to move the queen to b5 and to c6, or to b5 and to d7 to re-enter into the attack. I think that instead of this check on b4, centralizing the queen by placing the queen on d5 would have been interesting, because you make this move winning as well a tempo, because you attack the rook on a8, and now of course black will want to try to regain this tempo by attacking the queen by playing rook to d8, attacking the queen. So here we must find a good place for the queen where it's still involved in the attack, and that's the square e4, queen to e4. So we prevent the rook from going to e8, and we are controlling this e-file completely. It's very difficult now for black to improve the position of his worst piece, because if he moves g6, then bishop goes to h6 check, like something like this happened in the game. So this would be a good way of continuing the attack in the game. Let's go back now. Here you played queen before check, c5 was played now, and you move with the queen to b5. Your opponent played now the move queen to d8. He could have activated his rook now here by moving h5. This could have been a way for him to try to move away with this rook and trying to activate it. Well, let me be precise. He must first play g5, and then the rook can come out this way. This could have been an idea for him, but he didn't see it. He was perhaps a bit afraid of your attack. He went back with the queen to d8, and this gave you the option of entering with the queen again into the area where the attack will be. Now we can see that one of the things that you are doing very well now is that you are trying to involve all the pieces in the attack. The bishop is well placed, the rook is well placed, and the queen is now well placed, very active. The only piece that is not activated in the attack is the bishop on d2, but black tries now to improve the position of his worst piece by playing the move g6. The idea is to play king to g7 and then bring the rook out this way, but the fact is that by g6 you spotted it immediately that the square h6 becomes so weak now, so bishop h6 check, the king must go to g8, and now this rook on h8 is there and will stay there for ages, because it's not possible to move it away from there. The only way to make space for this rook to move would be to move the king. Now the king has no place to go. The only option to move the king away would be to f7 if you first place, for example, f5. But if you place f5, then the queen comes to e6, checkmating the king. So that means that this rook on h8 is stuck there forever. You continued with bishop now to g2, attacking the rook on a8. The rook went to c8, queen to b7 was played now, and he tried to attack here, advancing this pawn, trying to open this c-file where your king is standing. But you played bishop to h3, attacking the rook, and here your opponent made a big mistake in a lost position. Let's be clear, the position is lost for black. Whatever he would have done, he would lose the game sooner or later, but he made it really fast by playing f5 without looking at this square g7 where you could checkmate him immediately. Now let's have a look at other possibilities. If he would have played, here is a beautiful tactical pattern that can be shown, is if he plays rook to c7 attacking your queen, then we can make use of the fact that the black king cannot go to these two squares. So if we can persuade this queen to leave the back rank, then we have a back rank mate here. So that means if we can play queen takes e7, if queen takes on c7, then rook to e8 is checkmate. So here we win the game with this tactical idea. Another option would be to bring the rook to b8. Then we have to be a little bit more patient. The same idea that this square is the square where we can give a checkmate bring us to the move queen to e4, and the idea is of course to go here, threaten checkmate, control also this square e8, so no queen e8 is possible, so still black is completely without any freedom of movement. If he takes up on d3 for example, then queen to e5 and mating the following move almost. I mean, the only way to save it is by sacrificing the queen on f8, but that's of course something that we don't need to look at. It's simply wrong. And if you place f5 for example, then queen to e6 is checkmate again. So black is here completely lost. Alright, I'll make an end now to this video because we saw different tactical ideas in this game. Some of them you saw very well, like this rook takes e5 and rook takes e7 ideas, and some other ideas were missed, but that is what happens in almost every game. We see some things, some other things we don't see, and anyway, looking at all of the games that we play in a very critical way is the way to improve and to learn how to recognize this kind of tactical patterns more and more. Okay, I hope you found this video useful, and okay, I'll say goodbye now, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.